Soldiers arrived at the Battle of Belleau Wood. They found French soldiers in retreat. The French insisted the Americans retreat as well, but Captain Lloyd Williams, the Americans' commanding officer, stared at the French soldier and gave an absolutely chilling response. Henry VIII, Genghis Khan, Marie Antoinette, and Alexander the Great. There are plenty of names that have gone down in history for great and terrible reasons. However, what about the people whose names aren't in every history book? After all, they can't cover everyone, but that doesn't mean these lesser-known men and women didn't have some exciting stories to tell. A noble woman who owned land in the Kingdom of Hungary in the late 16th and early 17th century has a rather notorious world record. She is listed as the most prolific female murderer of all time. Countess Elizabeth Báthory de Exed would lure peasant girls into her castle with the promise of work and lodging, only to then ritualistically murder them. During her trial, it was said she killed roughly 650 girls, though historians have since disputed this claim. Either way, her victims totaled in the hundreds. The investigation into Countess Elizabeth Báthory de Exed produced rather stomach-churning results. After arresting the Countess, details began to emerge about the extent of the torture she performed. She used needles, covered girls in honey, and live ants, and possibly even performed acts of cannibalism by biting the faces and arms of some girls. But Hungary wasn't the only place with blood on its hands. Halfway across the world, another ruler was setting new records for brutality. After the warlord Timur, also known as Tamerlane, conquered the ancient city of Delhi, he took control and brought the hammer down. The city was ransacked, plundered, and destroyed. Timur ordered 1,000 captives to be executed. When the city's inhabitants tried to rise up against the new overlords, Timur made piles of corpses. The city of Delhi didn't fully recover from this devastation for nearly 100 years. One of the most haunting stories surrounding Timur actually took place after his death, when his tomb was exhumed. An inscription was allegedly found within his casket. The inscription read, "Whomsoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." 3 days after the exhumation of Timur's tomb, Germany initiated Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history. You might be amazed at that coincidence, but you'll also remember that Adolf Hitler wasn't just waiting for a curse to be called upon the Soviet Union before he invaded them. So, of course, you'll dismiss the evidence of Timur's curse as a massive coincidence. However, there's another aspect to this curse which people tend to forget. In November 1942, Timur's body was reburied with full Islamic ritual. Soon after, the tide turned within the Soviet Union with the Battle of Stalingrad, marking the downfall of the German invasion. Now, was that a coincidence too? But one of the ghastliest moments in Timur's military conquests was the destruction of Baghdad during his war with the Ottoman Empire in the late spring of 1401. The city of 20,000 was captured by Timur, who commanded that each of his soldiers bring back 2 severed heads. Presumably worried about coming back empty-handed, Timur's soldiers panicked when they ran out of enemies to behead. So they made up the shortage by beheading prisoners that they'd already taken. Some soldiers even beheaded their own wives for fear of shortchanging Timur. Speaking of absolute power-driving people to extremes, let's head over to Korea, where a crown prince took acting out to horrifying new heights. At age 15, Crown Prince Sado of Korea was appointed regent by his father, King Yongjo, and given the power to make important administrative decisions. But according to the memoirs of Sado's wife, Lady Haegyong, nothing Sado did would ever satisfy his father. No matter what decision he made, it was wrong. And Yongjo would deliberately humiliate Sado by criticizing him in front of a crowd. No wonder the poor kid had issues. After Prince Sado's stepmother and grandmother both died in the same month, his mind snapped. He became cruel and violent. He beat his eunuchs, killed palace staff, and assaulted several ladies-in-waiting. In one instance, he walked into his rooms holding the recently severed head of a eunuch whom he'd just killed. He then forced anyone who was around, including his own wife, to look at it. Eventually, Sado's behavior got way too out of control for his mother. Consort Yang, Sado's wife, had spoken to her about his killings, but begged her not to say anything for fear of what he'd do if he found out she'd told her. Yang stayed silent for a while, but when a rumor started circulating that Sado had entered the palace with the intention of killing his father, enough was enough. She apparently went to Yangzhou that same day and told him that Sado was out of control and had to be executed. When it came to dealing with Sado, Yangzhou had a bit of a conundrum. On the one hand, he knew that killing Sado was pretty much his only option, but on the other hand, it was against the law to spoil a royal body, and his innocent wife and son could also be killed if he was executed as a criminal. Yangzhou's solution was to force Sado to climb into a rice chest and be left to die. It took 7 days for him to finally starve to death, but technically he wasn't executed. Unfortunately, unstable heirs weren't limited to Korea. Over in the Ottoman Empire, a teenage tyrant decided subtlety was overrated. Murad IV, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, was born during a particularly violent period for his kingdom. Being under perpetual attack can be stressful, even for the most seasoned leaders, but Murad took it all in stride and did as the Romans do, using the violence to his advantage. During his reign, he killed his siblings, banned smoking and coffee, making their use punishable by death, and made sure to hang or impale anyone who defied him. And that was just for starters. He had his corrupted viziers strangled to death in his presence, executed a bunch of high-ranking military officials, and had the head of the Islamic Supreme Court assassinated. All in all, he was one scary dude that you were better off not to mess with. From the brutal courts of Constantinople, let's shift gears to the far more mystical halls of Elizabethan England, where one man mixed science with a little bit of sorcery. Throughout most of his time at court, John Dee remained a close advisor to Elizabeth Báthory. She depended on him for counsel in matters of science, medicine, and exploration, not to mention a little private astrology. Elizabeth even trusted Dee to choose the date of her coronation. One of the best images we have of John Dee is that in a painting called John Dee Performing an Experiment Before Queen Elizabeth I. The painting shows Dee standing before the Queen in her court. A room of amazed courtiers look on as Dee creates a flame in a silver goblet. In 2016, however, an X-ray scan of the painting revealed a surprising secret. An original version of the painting showed Dee standing in front of Elizabeth, surrounded by a ring of human skulls. Dee and Elizabeth sometimes communicated in secret. They would send letters back and forth, written in secret code. He would sign his coded letters 007. Now that sounds familiar. By most accounts, Dee's partnership with the mystic Edward Kelly was built on dishonesty, and many suspect Dee was suckered by the charlatan Kelly, who had a history of fraud and forgery. Not only did he have several aliases, but a conviction of counterfeiting in 1574 cost him his ears, a disfigurement he hid from then on with a black skull cap. Others noted Kelly had a talent for ventriloquism, which might have helped him communicate with spirits. John Dee's wife, Jane, participated in her husband's work as well, providing him with important insights on matters of women's reproductive and sexual health. In return, John, with the help of Edward Kelly, helped Jane communicate with angels. This continued until the angels advised them that they should try partner swapping with Kelly and his wife, Joanna. Together, John and Jane Dee had 8 children. There is, however, reason to believe that their son Theodore was actually fathered by none other than Edward Kelly. Though Dee was distraught that the angels suggested he and Kelly share their wives, they allegedly went through with the arrangement. Who was Dee to question the word of a definitely real angel? Dee and Kelly parted ways almost immediately after the partner-swapping incident. Kelly set out for Germany, where his criminal past caught up with him. Kelly promised and failed to turn iron into gold for Prince Rudolph II. Arrested for fraud, Kelly was killed trying to escape from a German prison. While Dee was busy decoding the stars, back in ancient Greece, some tough-talking Spartans were proving that sometimes the sharpest weapon is a single word. In the 4th century BC, Philip II of Macedon campaigned against the Greek city-states. Having conquered most of southern Greece, he sent a message to Sparta which read, "You are advised to submit without further delay, for if I bring my army into your land, I will destroy your farms, slay your people, and raze your city." The Spartans replied with a single word, "if." Suffice it to say, Philip did not attack Sparta. Fast forward a millennium or so, and you'll find a very different kind of battlefield, one where family dinners could end with a knife in the back, courtesy of the Borgias. On June 14, 1497, Cesare Borgia's brother Giovanni was murdered. He was last seen with Cesare and the rest of the siblings in their mother's home. Giovanni then departed and was never seen alive again. The next morning his horse returned home, riderless. He was later found in the Tiber River. In the aftermath of his brother's murder, Borgia's father, Pope Alexander VI, was devastated and insisted on a thorough investigation into the murder. However, just a week into the case, the Pope called the whole thing off. This might seem suspicious for a man whose son was murdered and who had the power of the Church behind him, but with the Borgias, things were never so simple. Both Giovanni and Cesare had been having affairs with their brother Geoffrey's wife, Sancha. That meant that both of the Pope's surviving sons were suspects in his dead son's murder. No wonder he called off the dogs. One other reason why Cesare Borgia might have had a hand in killing his brother is the fact that Giovanni was being groomed for military command by Pope Alexander VI. Indeed, because nepotism was entirely the way that the Borgia family rolled, Giovanni had been given the rank of Captain General over the papacy's military forces. Just over a year after his brother's murder, Cesare Borgia became the first man in history to resign his position as a cardinal and became more involved in the military. Before Cesare Borgia's wild lifestyle caught up with him, leaving him ravaged by syphilis, he was known to have central parties at the Vatican, where guests would be encouraged to make use of the 50 honest prostitutes who had been invited. The Banquet of the Chestnuts, as it was known, was a massive feast and sexual marathon that took place in October 1501. The Pope himself was said to be in attendance, and prizes were given to those who could perform the act, most often with the courtesans. While the Borgias schemed in the shadows, another figure took the direct approach, charging straight into battle with fire, fury, and a seriously sharp tongue. Boudica was a Celtic queen of the Iceni tribe, who led an uprising against the occupying Roman Empire around 60 A.D., when their lands were taken by the Romans and they were no longer treated as allies. Indeed, after Boudica's husband died, the Romans sensed the power vacuum, took her lands, and assaulted her and her daughters. Not one to sit back and let the Romans walk all over her, Boudica went on the attack. She was eventually defeated in the Battle of Watling Street, but not before causing catastrophic damage to her enemies, killing 80,000 Roman soldiers. An inspiration to the British for millennia, Boudica is still remembered as an ideal image of a warrior queen. Based on descriptions of Boudica by ancient historians, she was a pretty terrifying figure. She was described as being of above-average height, having a piercing gaze, waist-long, fire-red hair, a harsh voice, and possessing a greater intelligence than often belongs to women. Okay, not the greatest compliment, but from an ancient historian, that was about as good as it gets for a woman. According to some historians, the main reason that Boudica was able to accomplish as much as she did was because of her keen intelligence. I'm sure that this wasn't the only reason, but could an idiot have rallied and led an army well enough to level 3 Roman cities and kill 80,000 Romans? Probably not. How Boudica died still remains something of a mystery. According to Tacitus, she swallowed poison when she realized she had no chance of winning the final battle. But Dio suggested that she was sick. It has always been suggested that if she was sick, it could have been from the poison, so it kinda brings everything full circle. The future King Peter I of Portugal was deeply in love with Inês de Castro, to the point where he neglected his own wife and endangered his country's international alliances. Infuriated, Peter's father, King Afonso IV, sent 3 men to decapitate Inês. In revenge, the heartbroken Peter found 2 of her killers and had their hearts viciously ripped from their bodies. They had ripped his heart out, so he did the same. He then exhumed Inês's body, placed her on a throne, and forced his entire kingdom to bow before her corpse and kiss her hand. And finally, from medieval heartbreak to modern heroics, because when you're a U.S. Marine at Belleau Wood, the only direction is forward. The 51st Company, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment were sent to Belleau Wood to back up a battalion of French soldiers. When they arrived, they found the French hastening back to their camp. They were overwhelmed and insisted the Americans retreat. The commanding officer of the company stared at the French soldier and cried, "Retreat! Hell! We just got here!" 9 days later, that officer, Captain Lloyd Williams, would be killed in battle. The 2nd Battalion would adopt the motto, "Retreat Hell," in his honor. From ancient queens to battlefield legends, history's lesser-known names prove one thing. Sometimes the most unforgettable stories are the ones you almost never hear. Thanks for watching History Exposé. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factornate, for more incredible facts about everything.